With Belisarius Prime now officially being in Rise of Kingdoms, we can all say even though he isn't the most game-breaking commander, he is still a slightly meta-changing commander. He has certainly influenced the best 7 marches that you run. So if you're looking to run any amount of marches, whether it be 1 march, 2 marches, 3 marches, 4 marches, 5 marches, 6 marches, or even 7 marches, I will give you my opinion on the best 7 marchers currently in Rise of Kingdoms. It'll be a mixture of cavs, infantry, and archers. So if you're looking for the best Rise of Kingdoms Murderball as of 2024 with the release of Belisarius Prime, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now let's quickly start off by saying I won't be providing too many alternatives in today's video. I'll try and provide some every now and again when I think a commander is still fairly new to the game or still pretty rare. But really all the commanders I talk about today will be absolute meta. They'll be the meta for infantry, meta for cavalry. There won't really be any commanders I'm like on the fence about, or any commanders that I say, yeah, go get them, or yeah, don't get them. It'll be like, get this commander or ignore this commander. It'll be pretty blunt, pretty straightforward. Just trying to give you the best 7 March Murderball. I will provide some substitutes and some other options, but really we're going to be focusing on the best 7 March Ball. Now let's start off with doing 1 March for your Murderball, and there are 3 options of course, and it's just going to depend on which troop type you are running. If you're running archers, you get Zulang with Hermann Prime, because that's just going to be the best archer march. If you're running cavalry, you get Nevsky with Joan Prime, because that's just going to be the best cavalry march. And if you are running infantry, then you get Leo Chur with a CPO to begin with. And in my opinion, for your first ever march, this is the best one. Leo Chur with CPO, because it is a double AoE march with some smite damage. I think it's better than the Zulang with the Hermann Prime as an initial march, because with Zulang Hermann, you get to benefit from the debuffs a lot more if you're running more marches. But when you look at a commander like Scipio Africanus, or really more when you look at Leo Chur, you're going to benefit from his march speed reduction, especially with just 1 march. And of course, these are small things, but those top 3 marches are relatively close to each other in strength, especially Leo Chur and also Zulang and Hermann. So when we look at these commanders, we need to consider them as if any small advantage means they are a better first choice, and in my opinion, I think infantry will be your best first pickup for a march. Leo Chur with CPO, pretty sure you run that CPO as the primary, and you're going to have a very solid march. Double AoE, 2000 plus damage factor on each skill. You're going to have fairly decent stats from Leo Chur, especially attacking stats, and a very, very solid expertise. And then CPO can be a cheap 5-5-5-1 investment, for example, with a lot of very solid stats as well, and some okay synergy with Leo Chur. This also will set you up later if you're looking to branch off into 2 infantry marches, as you can split these commanders, and I'll show you what to do with them once we get there. But really, for the beginning of Season of Conquest or Season 3, if you had to pick one troop type, I would personally go Leo Chur with a CPO. You can of course also consider Gorgo and Alexander the Great, who are also amazing options as well and will trade pretty much just as good. Just I do personally prefer the double AoE of CPO, but Gorgo and Alex work pretty much just as fine. Moving into 2 marches for your Murderball now, you're going to pick up an Archer march at this point, just because Archers and Infantry, in my opinion, they're the 2 strongest troop types right now. They're almost completely on par, and you would pick up a Zulang with a Hermann Prime. Once again, a double AoE march. Very solid damage from both of these commanders, both 2000 damage AoEs, Zulang with a 5 target circle AoE, and they both got really good debuffs. Zulang is going to make it so that the target deals 15% less all damage for 3 seconds, and Hermann Prime, I mean, he's just going to put a crap load of poison stacks on your enemies, which means your skill damage is going to be drastically increased for 3 of your 4 commanders. Keep in mind, Leo Chur's skill damage will not be increased, because he is a smite damage commander, but CPOs will, so that is some good news there. The reason I say you get Zulang with Hermann second, even though you can get them first for sure, is because you just do them second, since they are a little bit more heavy on debuffs than someone like Leo Chur is. It's a very small thing, like I said, but in my opinion, it's a better second pickup. There are a few alterations here. You can run Zulang with YSG, you can run Zulang with a Boudica, for example, or a Shobani Pal, but you can also run Hermann with YSG and stuff like that too, especially if you're running 1 march, you could do Zulang, but if you're not running 1 march, I think Hermann YSG with a CPO Leo Chur is a little bit better than running a Zulang YSG and Scipio Liucher, because Zulang YSG will fall back really compared to your other marches since it will be much slower, whereas Herman Prime will be able to keep up a little bit more with those infantry commanders. That being said, I think Zulang with Herman's easily the better march. Herman is boosting AoE by quite a bit on his third skill. He's got march speed, he's got defense. He's also got some really solid debuffs, like I said, and it's going to pretty much prepare you for that 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th march later down the track, if you do choose to go for that. And there's going to be some pretty good synergy with your infantry commanders, who are all dealing AoE. So it's pretty much all AoE debuffs at this point, all AoE damage, and that means they're all going to be boosting each other's AoE, with Herman's Poison doing AoE, Zulang's all damage decreases being in AoE. It's all just some good times for both of your marches. That means, in my opinion, for 2 marches, you go with a Zulang and a Herman, and you go with a Liucher and a Scipio. You can obviously pick up the Cav march, you can also pick up the infantry march second and the archer march first. It does kind of come down to where your better equipment is, but that is the most optimal format that I've given you so far. As for your 3rd march, well, we're just going to go pick up the Cav march at this point. The reason I get them last, well, Cavs are slightly weaker at the moment than the other 2 troop types, and that means that you might be able to get a new Cav commander by the time you do start working on your Cav march. So we are probably going to expect a new Cav commander about 12 months from now, maybe a bit less, 8-9 months. And that means by the time you work on 3 marches, you're probably at least 8-9 months in, and that means you can probably wait or have already seen some of the new Cav commanders that could be coming to the game in the future. So that means you can make a better choice. But as of right now, if you're looking for 3 marches, you pick up Nevsky and Joan. Nevsky and Joan, very solid march. Nevsky's got an amazing defense debuff on a surrounded target, and it means that you can go up to 3 enemies surrounding, and that means obviously it only makes sense to get Nevsky as your 3rd commander, because you got archers, you got infantry, you got cavalry, and you've got that 3x swarm that you bring by yourself to make the target have a 45% defense reduction. So it's definitely a very powerful active skill debuff, and it works much better when you have 3 people swarming, which is why it kind of makes sense to get Nevsky as a 3rd march, especially nowadays, considering he's not as powerful as the archer or infantry commanders respectively. Obviously, that doesn't mean him or Joan are bad by any means. Joan is an amazing double AoE on her active skill and 4th skill, and Nevsky is a really big stat powerhouse. Even nowadays, his stats aren't game-breaking anymore, but they are still extremely powerful, and are still borderline game-breaking. I think there are some higher stat commanders out there, in my opinion, like Gorgo commanders, also like even Herman Prime, just because the amount of stat debuffs they're giving. But Nevsky is still a very stat-heavy commander who still does trade pretty good. So Nevsky with Joan is going to be your solid 3rd Cav march that will work very well with your infantry and your archers. As a recap for 3 marches, in my opinion, you're going to go Zulang with a Herman, you're going to go Liucher with a Scipio Prime, and then you're going to go a Nevsky with a Joan Prime, giving you one of each troop type, and making it a very solid Murderball. Now moving on to 4 marches, I'm going to say you get another infantry march at this point, and that's just because you are going to be looking a little bit more at commanders in the future who will benefit from extra commanders in your Murderball. So, in my opinion, if you're looking to go for 4 marches, you're going to run Liucher with Gorgo. This is going to give you both of the infantry smite commanders currently in the game, and it's going to be a really solid combo. It's one of, if not the best infantry combinations currently in the game, between Liucher being a very big damage powerhouse commander, and Gorgo just synergizing really well with him, and giving herself a ton of stats to really boost Liucher to the next level. So Gorgo is a very powerful commander with Liucher. She's boosting normal damage, which is great with smite commanders, and they overall do trade very well. With that 2nd infantry march though, you're going to run a Guan with a Scipio. Even nowadays, Guan's debuff when you're moving into 4 marches is pretty valuable, and it can still trade extremely well. So I do recommend picking it up if you're moving towards 4 marches, especially when we look at Scipio Africanus, and the fact that he's still got that health debuff, which is extremely valuable, and you don't want to get rid of it. You can also consider doing a Liucher with an Alex if you do not have Gorgo, and this combination is pretty much just as powerful, and then you run the Guan with the Scipio still. So Liucher with Alex or Liucher with Gorgo, Guan with Scipio, and then for your other 2 marches, you just run those archers of a Zulang with a Herman, and the Nevsky with a Joan. Do keep in mind though, the next 2 commander pairings I'll talk about for the 5th and 6th march can be used as your 4th march as well, depending on which troop type you main. So when I talk about the next commander pairing that you add, you could use it, and the next one's going to be a Cav march. And then when I talk about the 6th commander pairing you add, you could also use it as your 4th. So really just decide which troop type you main. But personally, I think that it's better to have 2 infantry marches when you're at 4 marches than it is to have 2 cav marches or 2 archer marches. But they are very similar, and then it's not going to be a massive difference between them. Now moving on to 5 marches for your Murderball. This is where we're going to pick up Hauche Bing and Belisarius. And the reason we pick up Belisarius this late into the Murderball is because that's when he gets his full up to 60% really all damage increase. I've had someone say it's not 60%, it is kind of like 60% because each march is dealing 12% more all damage, since it is a debuff that's just added to the opponent at all times. So it's definitely a very powerful debuff to have. And when you've got 5 marches, Belisarius is pretty much at that peaking level. So Belisarius is easily that really good commander when you move towards 5 marches, and I'd put him with Hauche Bing. Hauche Bing, really solid Cav's primary commander, fast rage cycle, very decent damaging stats nowadays, and it's going to make a good pairing with Belisarius, who's got a lot of march speed. That's going to allow him to get away from some of those sticky combat situations. Not to mention he definitely needs a fast active skill, which pretty much gives him a unique version of a silence. It's a silence that's not really a silence is the best way to put it. So he's definitely a powerful commander in that regard, and his active skill is very powerful when you use it with an extremely fast rage cycle, such as Hauche Bing. So in my opinion, when you're moving towards 5 marches, Hauche Bing with Belisarius, Nevsky with a Joan Prime, and then for your infantry, you're going to stick with either the Alex and Leo Chur, or the Gorgo and Leo Chur, and then you're going to look at the Scipio or the Guan with the Scipio, and finally, for your Archer March, you'll be looking at a Zulang with a Hermit Prime. Now moving into 6 marches, this is where we pick up the final Archer March that we will grab, and this is going to be a Boudica with an Ashurbanipal. I mean, this is a very solid combination. The only thing is there isn't really any insane debuffs on Ashurbanipal. That's the reason I put him so down low on the list, and I think he's only good for a 6th march. He isn't really bringing anything to a Murderball but damage, and yes, he's a very strong commander, but I think giving the support and the damage buffs and the actual buffs to your Murderball is more important than a good amount of damage factor and some decent stat increases for the 1 march. So that's why Ashurbanipal is so low down the list, but that being said, he can also be used as your 4th march. So you could use Boudica Ashurbanipal as your 4th march. You could even use Hauche Bing with a Belisarius or a William as your 4th march. I forgot to mention William is a good substitute to Belisarius. And you can also even use the Gorgo and the Leo Chur still as your 4th march or your 5th march or your 6th march. So the 3 commander pairings I've just mentioned, they all work within pretty much interchangeably. They can be your 4th, 5th or 6th march, depending on what you prefer, and it wouldn't be too insane to run Boudica Ashurbanipal as your 4th march, since it's still going to trade really well. The reason this combination is good is pretty much just Boudica has a really good debuff on her active skill, she's got decent damage factor, and she's got some pretty okay stats all round. I will make sure that you do know, don't expertise her, just take her to 5-5-5-1, and you're in a really good position. No need to upgrade the 4th skill, no need to expertise her, since these are all relatively small effects that you're not really going to benefit from. Ashurbanipal, on the other hand, you have to expertise him, and he's just going to deal some really solid damage. He's going to improve your trades by quite a bit, just because he synergizes really well with Boudica Prime. But I think that Hauche Bing with Belisarius or William, and then a Leo Chur with an Alex or Gorgo is just a better option than the Boudica with Ashurbanipal really could ever be, because they are bringing a lot more debuffs and a lot more overall value than just some damage and 1 debuff that Boudica has. Now finally, when we move into 7 marches here, there are really 4 options that you can pick from, and it kind of depends on which troop type you want to run, or if you want to use an engineering march, and these are all fairly equal options. They all would work pretty well, and really 7 marches is a whale territory only, so any commanders you pick should trade pretty decently. If you decide to go for archers, I would go Henry with YSG. It's a tanky combo. Henry's active skill is going to make you very tanky. He's got decent march speed of territory. He's got decent attack and defense. And he's got some good revenge damage and normal damage bonuses. So Henry, really good option with YSG for a 3rd march. And is something I personally run. Definitely not the strongest of my 3 archer marches, but is definitely not a weak march by any means and still does trade very amazingly. If you are an infantry main, I mean, it's very difficult to grab 3 infantry marches. It is kind of bad trades at that point, just because 3 infantry marches, you're looking at some of the old, not so meta commanders. But if you had to do it, I would go a Leochur with that Gorgo. You pretty much have to have, Gorgo with Leochur. You have to have Gorgo at this point. She should be the primary. You're going to stick with the Guan and the CPO. And then you can just go like a Tarek with a Sargon, or a Sargon primary, Tarek secondary. That's what I really recommend for 3 infantry marches. Sargon Tarek. It's not very meta, it's not very OP, but it is still usable, and for 7 marches it will work, and it will give you some pretty decent debuffs, especially if you can stick to the opponents a little bit more. So if you're a whale who is able to get max march speed, crystal tech really, you'll be able to trade pretty decent with Sargon just because you'll be able to keep up with your opponents. Another option, if you're a Cav main, is you can go with a Nevsky and a Joan like usual. Then you go Hao Bing with Belisarius, and then a Zhang Yu with a William. That's a double AoE Cav commander combo. Zhang Yu, pretty much the same rage cycle speed as Hao Bing, and William, really good supporting stuff for your march. The other combination which I can recommend is an engineering one, and I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken here, and I might be mistaken, it's a Gonzalo Margaret. That's the current meta commander pairing, or it's Gonzalo Garjamada. I don't know off the top of my head, I'm not very in tune with the Siege game, but to my knowledge, it's Gonzalo with one of the 2 commanders that I just showed you. So pick whichever one is the meta one. You could probably find a video somewhere out there that tells you which one is best, and that is what I'd recommend if you want an engineering march. To my knowledge, Bubba is not the meta engineering commander, so I wouldn't really look at him. If I had to guess though, it's probably going to be Gonzalo with Garjamada, just because they are both the 2 newest Smite commanders at the very least. But then that being said, Garjamada is similar to a Sargon, so maybe Margaret is the better option. So if you had to pick, I'd probably go a Margaret with a Gonzalo secondary, just because Margaret's active skill will boost your normal damage, and Gonzalo is a Smite commander, so that will boost his Smite ranged AoE. So this is definitely a solid march, it will trade very well, and if you are willing to sacrifice some of your materials and equipment to make that ranged march, you could definitely get away with it, and it should be a pretty decent upgrade to your Murderball. Other than that, you can also consider Trajan, but nowadays I think Trajan is kind of dead in the water, especially since there aren't any really good supporting commanders to go with him. But he is an option if you want him. Trajan with like a Caesar, Ethelfled, Trajan with Mulan, Trajan with Mehmed, or also Honda. It does work, but it's nowhere near as strong as it really used to be. So that means, as a recap, for the best 7 March possible Murderball in Rise of Kingdoms, you have a Zulang with a Herman, a Boudica with an Ashurbanipal. You've currently got that Leochur with an Alex, or also with a Gorgo. You've got the Nevsky with the Joan, and you've also got that Hao Bing with the Belisarius Prime. And then from there, you pick your 7th March. Maybe it's a Gonzalo with a Margaret, maybe it is the Zhang Yu with the William, or maybe it is just another infantry march like a CPO with a Tarek, or finally it can be that archer march of the Henry with the YSG, depending on which commander or troop type you do prefer. But that is easily the current best 7 March Murderball in Rise of Kingdoms, starting at 1 March and moving up all the way to 7. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, then I do want to ask you guys for a small favor, and that is consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. If you have been a fan of my content, or you're just interested in seeing me make more videos, when you subscribe, it definitely helps out, and it is much appreciated. So to everyone who's subscribed already, a massive thank you to you, and to everybody who just subscribed, an even bigger thank you to you as well. Now, I just wanted to say I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.